Video of what appears to be the final moments of a China Eastern Airlines flight may provide clues to what went wrong. More vaccination centres will be closing in the coming weeks, a sign that Singapore may be near the end of the pandemic. And a new report outlines ways to help Singapore's power sector reach net zero emissions by 2050. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story with me, Hairianto Diman. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you will not miss a single episode. All 132 passengers and crew aboard the China Eastern Airlines plane, which crashed on Monday, are feared dead as rescue operations continue. Footage from the crash site shows emergency teams working to recover debris scattered across a remote mountainous area near Wuzhou in Guangxi province. According to China's state media reports, identity cards, wallets and other personal belongings were also found. The airline has confirmed there are fatalities but did not provide more information. Flight MU5735 was en route from Kunming to Guangzhou when it suddenly plunged from cruising altitude and crashed. Now, surveillance video has emerged of what could be the plane's final moments. Widely shared on social media, the footage appears to show the plane making a near vertical dive into the ground. Chinese media outlet The Paper says it had verified that the video was shot by a mining company near the crash site, but its authenticity could not be independently verified. Let's get the latest from our China correspondent Elizabeth Law. Liz, what do we know about the plane's final moments from unofficial flight data and video showing what appears to be the plane in a near vertical dive?
Well, we've all seen the video now that was shot by surveillance cameras that was set up by a mining company that had operations around the area. So what experts are now saying that there have been similar incidents that have happened in the past, including the Silk Air flight that crashed into the Palembang in the 90s. So experts are saying that there can be two possible causes. One is that there was a very, very serious mechanical fault that left the pilot completely unable to overcome it with human intervention. Or the other is that simply something quite terrible could have happened to the pilot that had led to him actually pressing onto the controls and leading the plane to nosedive in that way. But I think until there is more evidence and more information that comes out, it will be very hard to speculate about what exactly is happening.
With the aviation world now facing a new mystery, what will investigators look for in determining what caused the crash?
Right. Of course, we are not aviation experts here, but one thing that investigators often look for, of course, is what they call the black box. Now, the black box is what is essentially a crash-proof recorder that is usually within the cockpit. And of course, it records everything that goes on throughout the entire flight. And often when investigators have to listen to footage from black boxes that have been retrieved, it makes for very, very chilling listening. So that will be very informative in them piecing together the final moments of this flight. And of course, they will be looking for avionics data as well to try and recreate what exactly happened that led to this quite fatal crash.
And Liz, before you go, what are you hearing about the latest from the crash site?
Right. So from what we know today, local authorities have already cleared out 5 hotels within the region so that family members can be moved there. I think they're moving the family members from Guangzhou Baiyun Airport towards Guangxi, where they can be closer to search and rescue efforts. We also know that Vice Premier Liu He and State Councillor Wang Yong have also been dispatched to Guangxi, where they are now overseeing search and rescue efforts. from images, we've also seen they've set up emergency medical tents, and there are lines of ambulances waiting just in case they do find any survivors, anyone who they can, to keep some hope that they will find someone alive.
Elizabeth, thank you for the updates. China correspondent Elizabeth Law in Beijing. You can follow the latest developments at straitstimes.com. Back home, more vaccination centres here will be closing in the coming weeks, following 10 that have already done so. Currently, 30 centres are still operating, down from 40 last June. As Singapore's inoculation rate continues to rise, experts tell the Straits Times this move is timely, saying the closures are a sign that Singapore may be closer to the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, the weekly infection growth rate is below 1 for the 20th day in a row at 0.72. Daily cases also on a downward trend, about 7,500 new infections reported yesterday, 144 imported and the rest local. The vast majority of the local cases are still mild, with some 6,500 detected through ART. Another 857 were identified via PCR tests. A Singaporean man has admitted to being involved in his wife's death while they were holidaying in England last year and has pleaded guilty to manslaughter in a Newcastle court. However, he denied murdering his wife, a charge that he was initially given. He is currently in remand in Newcastle and is scheduled to go on trial on June 6th. The Marina Bay floating platform will host the National Day Parade again this year for the 11th time and likely its last before the site is redeveloped as the NS Square, which has been delayed. In a Facebook post today, Defence Minister Ng Eng Hen says NS Square's works are starting later due to COVID-19. The project was initially slated to be completed in 2025. And SPH shareholders have voted overwhelmingly to sell the company's non-media assets to a consortium, Cascaden Peak, which shareholders include Hotel Properties, its co-founder and managing director Ong Beng Seng, as well as Maple Tree and CapitaLand. According to a new report commissioned by the Energy Market Authority, Singapore's power sector can bring down its emissions to net zero by 2050, a realistic target that doesn't compromise energy security and affordability. The power sector now produces 40% of total emissions here, and that percentage is only likely to rise in the coming years. And so, the report recommends several strategies to reach this net zero aim, including developing multi-layered grids that allow for different sources of energy like solar panels. This is as opposed to Singapore's current single-layered grid, where electricity produced by generation companies flow into the national grid that households and businesses draw on. The report also charts out 3 potential pathways on the way to net zero. In the most optimistic scenario, energy and digital technologies develop rapidly and are complemented by strong global cooperation. And as you can see here, they'll help Singapore achieve a diverse energy supply mix in 2050, with the ability to import energy from many countries and use low-carbon hydrogen as a key energy source. Let's find out more from Assistant News Editor Audrey Tan. Audrey, out of the 3 scenarios outlined in the report, there's the most optimistic one which we just covered. Can you briefly elaborate on the other 2 scenarios and explain why it's important for Singapore to have more than one approach?
Hi Jan. Yeah, so the 3 different scenarios outlined in the latest report are meant to account for uncertainties in geopolitical environment as well as technologies. So yeah, the most optimistic scenario is when countries band together to collaborate on climate action, and at the same time we see that clean energy investments are paying off. In the second scenario, we see countries band together, but because of a protracted recovery from COVID-19, investments in clean energy has stalled, and so technological advancements have plateaued. So that in that particular scenario, Singapore would have to rely more on electricity imports and still use natural gas, which is a fossil fuel, and offset any of the emissions from burning that fossil fuel with carbon credits. The last scenario is when the world remains very fragmented geopolitically, but at the same time, any investments that are made into clean energy pays off in the later parts of the decade. So in that particular scenario, we see different kinds of energy options in our energy mix, including the use of nuclear energy, as well as hydrogen, which is a technology that's still nascent. But under that scenario, we assume that technology will pay off closer towards 2050, helping us achieve our 2050 targets. And of course, the different scenarios are important because as we have seen recently in changes in the energy demand and fluctuations in energy prices means the situation is very volatile. Nobody can say for sure what's going to happen in the years ahead and in 2050. So by having different strategies available to Singapore, it allows us to stay nimble and to see whether we can pivot to different strategies if one door closes to us.
And Audrey, one of those three scenarios includes nuclear energy as a potential power source. It was once deemed unsuitable for use here. So why is it an option now?
So nuclear technology has evolved by leaps and bounds since the last report in 2012 when the Singapore government deemed nuclear technologies unsuitable. So the report recommends that Singapore keeps a close watch on the various nuclear technologies, including nuclear fusion technology, which is supposed to be less dangerous and will kind of protect our country from nuclear fallout. But of course, even in that scenario where the world remains fragmented, and that means electricity imports won't be that available to us, nuclear is expected only to take up a small fraction of Singapore's energy mix in 2050 at around 10%. Singapore still hopes to rely on tapping solar power, geothermal energy, as well as hoping that hydrogen will eventually pay off as an option for us. So this scenario is not set in stone yet. Singapore is still keeping a close watch on the various technologies available to us. But nuclear technology has changed over time. And yes, so we just need to realize that nuclear technology then and now is not the same.
Audrey, thank you so much for the sharing. Audrey Tan there, Assistant News Editor. And those are our top stories for today. Visit straitstimes.com for more news and our YouTube channel for more videos. Subscribe by hitting the red button below. I'm Haryanto Diman. See you tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.